There's been a major escalation in the war of words between the United States and Ukraine after President Donald Trump launched an extraordinary attack on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, labelling him a dictator without elections. He's also repeated false claims that Ukraine is to blame for Russia's invasion. Donald Trump was responding to accusations from the Ukrainian leader that he was living in a disinformation space created by Russia. With me in the studio now is the ABC's Global Affairs editor, John Lyons. John, good morning. I'd just like to unpick some of the comments made by Donald Trump over the last day or so. He's called Volodymyr Zelenskyy a dictator. He said that he's doing badly in the polls. He's claimed that American money has gone missing. These are pretty extraordinary comments from the US president, aren't they?
Yes, Melissa, it's been a sudden and inexplicable deterioration. When you hear Donald Trump saying some of these things, you could substitute him for Vladimir Putin, where he talks about, he says, as we see now, he refuses to have elections, is very low in Ukrainian polls. The only thing he was good at was playing Biden like a fiddle, a dictator without elections. Zelenskyy better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Now, the question is, why is he doing that? These are almost the words of Vladimir Putin. What's really disturbing is for a United States president who is putting himself forward as a broker, as a mediator, saying, I will solve this. Why are you almost, it sounds a bit like a ventriloquist dummy. He's almost mouthing the words of Vladimir Putin, and I think that there's some very, very disturbing signs in this. Volodymyr Zelensky's been through a 3-year war. We know Donald Trump, America's own intelligence, made clear when the Russians amassed 100,000 or so troops on the border there. This was all public. British intelligence, American intelligence, the world's cameras. We saw the troops there. We saw them invade. So why is Donald Trump saying something now that the entire world can see is a lie?
Volodymyr Zelenskyy has said that Donald Trump is living in what he calls a disinformation space created by Russia. How powerful is that disinformation around the world?
I don't think it's smart for Volodymyr Zelenskyy to be throwing that sort of thing back at Donald Trump. He may say, well, he's attacking me. A war of words doesn't work, certainly for Ukraine. The United States and Donald Trump, that's part of his modus operandi, to attack first and think later. I think that for Volodymyr Zelenskyy, he's going to this table, if he can actually get a seat at the table for the negotiations, he's going with a fairly weak hand. The best thing he's got going for him now is the power of Europe, is uniting behind him, Turkey and others. But when he says it's a disinformation bubble, I'm not sure how you can prove that. I don't think that's a wise comment for Volodymyr Zelenskyy to be launching at Donald Trump.
Do you think this relationship between the United States and Ukraine is past the point of repair at this point?
I think for the sake of everybody, hopefully it's not. And I think Volodymyr Zelenskyy is a skilled diplomat. He's had to be for 3 years. He's had a gratuitous attack on him by the President of the United States. I think he needs to try to manage this very carefully. The really disturbing signs here, though, are the connection between the Americans and the Russians. The Trump administration, a key figure in this is someone called Kirill Dmitriev. He's one of the Russian negotiators in Saudi Arabia. He's very close to Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law. He runs the Russian Direct Investment Fund, a major funder, and the Russians in Saudi Arabia are more interested in talking about business opportunities in the Arctic and so forth than they are the Ukraine war. So there's two different agendas here. The Europeans and the Ukrainians want the war to be dealt with. The Russians think there's big business opportunities here. Jared Kushner, it's the Saudi, Jared Kushner, Russian triangle. and that's informing. We saw only a couple of weeks ago when Donald Trump came out with his Gaza plan, that was almost word for word what his son-in-law Jared Kushner had said at Harvard University 18 months before. So I think with this going on now, I think it's important to keep an eye on the men who are not in the room. Jared Kushner, the son-in-law, I believe is informing a lot of this, and Kirill Dmitriev, very close to Putin, very close to Kushner, was in the room for the first time. He doesn't normally go to these negotiations. So there's these hidden agendas behind the scenes that I think we need to unpick.
We know how heavily Ukraine relies on the United States in its war against, or in its war with Russia. Realistically, what would the loss of US support mean?
It would be a major blow, but what we're seeing at the moment, Mel, is we're seeing the Europeans realising this. Emergency meeting by Emmanuel Macron in Paris. Sir Keir Starmer in the UK now saying we will provide troops as peacekeepers. We're seeing almost a changing of the guard. We're seeing the United States retreating from the Ukraine battle, and we're seeing the Europeans saying for our self-interest as well, because if it's Ukraine now, it's Moldova next, it's Poland next. The Europeans are starting to try to fill the breach. We're seeing this major changeover in geopolitics right now.
We're seeing the leaders of the UK and France travelling to Washington, DC in the next little while to have conversations with Donald Trump about this issue. What do you expect will or could come out of those conversations?
I think they will plead with Donald Trump on Gaza, on that plan to essentially take over Gaza and turn it into a major real estate resort. And I think they're going to say to him, you can't, that Ukraine's not the demon here. Ukraine was attacked. And Vladimir Putin's been committing clearly war crimes, the number of civilians killed, civilian buildings hit by missiles. Ukraine has not been the villain here, and somehow they've got to try to convince Donald Trump to that effect.